Um, well, it started promisingly with the first half an hour against Serbia and has gone pretty much downhill from there on in, really. There was some slight glimmers of hope in the second half against Slovenia. I thought Cole Palmer and Kobe Manu impressed when they came on as subs. Even Anthony Gordon, in the few minutes he was on, showed a little spark. So there was some bits of positivity, but not huge amounts, if I'm honest. I guess the fact that we've only been beaten by one screamer from 25 yards so far in the tournament is one of the positives you can take. But this is kind of where the tournament really starts now with the knockout stages. So we really do have to start upping our performances a little bit. I think, as I said, barring the first half an hour against Serbia, we've looked pretty lackluster. We don't really have a lot of invention, given the amount of, really talented boys we've got in the team. We haven't really carved teams open and created a whole host of opportunities for ourselves to score goals. So that's been a little bit of a surprise to me, because I felt like the attacking third was where all our strongest players were. So I think that's where we've kind of fallen down a little bit. Perhaps that the front players are just not right at the top of their game. They almost look like a little bit frightened to try something a little bit different. And I think we have to get rid of those shackles if we're going to, really make an impression on this tournament. That's a good question. I think if we lost Declan Rice, I think we'd be lost really in midfield. I think most of the other players, there are some good replacements for. But I think if we lost Declan in the centre of the park there, I think we'd be really light. So I think he's probably one of our most important players. I'd like to see, a few of the fringe players given a bit more of a run out, if I'm honest. Ollie Watkins maybe a little bit longer, if that means, Harry dropping into perhaps a number 10 role and moving Jude back with Declan. That's an option they can have, or moving Jude back and putting Foden in the 10 role, and then giving Cole Palmer a start, or Anthony Gordon a start. There's options there for him. I'm not sure he's quite positive enough to go with those kind of options. He's very much a manager that likes to play it quite safe and doesn't want to get beaten. And I think that's kind of showed in our performances so far. I don't know if it's maybe got something to do with the fact that he was a defender himself, and that's kind of where he views the game from. That may have something to do with it. I think the job of England manager is also, if you really want to keep it, you don't want to lose football matches, and that maybe I think has an effect on the way that managers approach the games. And I think that might well be the case with Gareth. And he'll feel like the way that he's done it has been successful. I think that's what he'll feel like, because we got to a semi-final World Cup, we got to the final of the Euros, and it looks like it's a success the way that he's done it. However, I think he's slightly deluded in that fact, because when you look back at the runs that we had to get to those places, we didn't really kind of beat anyone of any significance along the way, and we certainly didn't play teams off the park on a regular basis. So I think that's probably why he's still sticking with doing it the way he's done it for the last 8 years, and not really kind of been a little bit more positive. I mean, if those guys have spent hard-earned money to go and follow the team, and they were expecting, as most of us were, we were expecting better performances than we've seen so far. We've won one football match, we've scored 2 goals, and I think people just expected better. And I don't think it's unusual. I mean, let's be honest, we were quite lucky to win the group, given those statistics. And so I can understand why there was an element of frustration amongst England fans. But I think at the same time, you do have to, look at it and say, okay, we've won the group.
It's put us in a favourable half of the draw again, which we had the last Euros, we had at the World Cup 2018. So, you could say Gareth's been very lucky in that regard. We're probably going to play a Dutch team who aren't a vintage Dutch team, just conceded 3 goals to Austria. So we might get lucky again, and we might get all the way to the semi-finals or a final again before we come up against a decent team. And so I guess it's a kind of a case of, a chip and a chair, if you want to use poker expression. We're in the tournament still. We're in the fairer side of the draw. We've still got a chance, but given the performances so far, it would be quite an upset, I think, if we were to go and win it. Well, I've always kind of been of the opinion that I'd like the England managers to be English, if I'm honest. And I actually think I feel like FIFA and UEFA should actually change the rules, and it should be a stipulation. Just like the players have got to have qualifications to be playing in that team as that country's person. I think the same thing should apply to the manager, because they're all one team at the end of the day. So I don't know why the criteria is different for a manager than it should be for a player. And with that in mind, I mean, you're kind of looking down the list of managers, Premier League managers at the moment. You'd probably say Eddie Howe was in pole position. If they're going to go down the route of having another Englishman in charge. Graham Potter has obviously had a few decent years, had a bit of a tough time at Chelsea, but, who hasn't? I mean, I think the relaxing of the rules was a little bit too much. I think it's become a bit too flexible. I've always felt like, you should have, some qualification where it's, either you are born in this country or your parents were born in this country. There should be some limits on who qualifies, and you shouldn't just have to live in the country for a certain amount of years to qualify to play for the national team. I don't kind of get that. There's players that have taken advantage of that rule. I mean, you go back to people like Tony Cascarino, Andy Townsend, one of my old teammates, guys there who didn't really kind of have an affiliation with Ireland in any way, shape or form until Ireland rang them up and went, "Oh, we think you're qualified to play for us. Could you come and play for us?" And they obviously went, "Well, I ain't going to get an England team, so why not?"
Yeah.
And the system has definitely been gamed down the years without a shadow of doubt. It's a good question, and I have given a little bit of thought to this. And I've in my lifetime, I've come up with John Major. Quite grey, quite dull, fairly uninteresting. Not really willing to think outside the box too much. Bit of an establishment man, and so yeah, that's why I've kind of come up with John Major. Really, as you can tell, I'm not Gareth's biggest fan when it comes to management. Watched him last night and seen what he's able to contribute. I'd definitely like to see him given a go in the team. He's had a terrific season in a team that struggled for a large part of the season. There was a lot of turmoil going on at Chelsea, and he was kind of one of the very few Chelsea players that could look back on that season and go, yeah, I had a decent season, I did well. And the boy's got a lot of ability. He'll probably be a little bit disappointed with his effort in the last minute, that he didn't make more of that opportunity. But I felt like he showed a lot of positivity and a lot of ability in the time that he was on. So I think he deserves a crack at it. I think there's a couple of things really. The first one is mental. You've got to want to be there. You've got to be that person who doesn't mind stepping up when the pressure's on. And that's a big thing. So you've got to have the right mentality going into it, first and foremost. And then to back that up, you've got to have decent technique, and there's lots of different ways of scoring penalties. Cole's, I think, is a little bit different to mine. I think he's uber confident when he gets up there. He doesn't look phased by anything. He's taken penalties in the last minutes of games, and I've watched him closely when he picks the ball up and he's going up to the penalty spot, and he looks like he's got a calm mind, and I think that's a massive part of it. And obviously the boy's got plenty of ability, so he's got the good combination there to have a good long career in penalty taking. You kind of do, but I like watching penalty shootouts. I do like watching the walk up because it's a fascinating thing to watch in terms of the psychology of everything, and you can almost see the fear in some players' faces. You really can, and so yeah, there's been plenty of time when I've watched it and gone, I wouldn't be surprised if he misses this, and lo and behold, he's ended up doing exactly that. But it's an interesting one, penalties, because you get in penalty shootouts, you get players really who aren't really used to taking them for that. You don't normally get 5 people in your team who are regular penalty takers, so you're always relying on people who haven't really been there. And we've suffered a little bit with that in the past, with people like David Batty missing penalties. Gareth himself. Chris Waddle, I think, was another one who wasn't a particularly regular penalty taker. So yeah, I do find the old shootouts fascinating, and I was only ever involved in one in my whole career, which was a big shame, really, because I kind of like the idea of being the hero in a penalty shootout, and I actually cost myself that opportunity in the one penalty shootout that I was involved in. Because I was at Old Trafford in FA Cup replay, and it was I think it was the first season that like penalty shootouts came in, and and the manager came to me after extra time, and he said, Matt, he said, I want you to take the first penalty in the penalty shootout. And I turned around to the manager and I went, I'm not taking the first one. I said, I want to take the last one because I want to be the one that scores them. And lo and behold, our first 4 penalty takers rocked up. I think it was Shearer, Ruddock, Adams, Barry Horn, all scored their penalties. And Man United missed 2, and I never got to take one. I look back and go, well, Tim Flowers had all the glory that night, so fair play to him.